Hello, and welcome back to the Crime Folio. Thank you for joining us as we open another file on the complexities of the human condition and its darkest turns. Love is often described as life's greatest gift. But what happens when that powerful emotion sours into obsession? When affection twists into jealousy, the line between passion and peril becomes dangerously thin. In today's case, we explore a tragic love triangle where intense emotions spiraled out of control, culminating in an irreversible act and leaving behind a devastating legacy. This is a story of how love, when corrupted, can lead to the ultimate tragedy. Case 1. The Stalker in the Shadows. An obsessive ex-girlfriend's jealousy escalates into a meticulously planned and brutal murder. Our first file opens in the sun-drenched suburbs of Mesa, Arizona, a place of manicured lawns and quiet, orderly lives. It was here that Travis Alexander built a life for himself. By all external measures, he was a portrait of success. At 30 years old, he was a charismatic and driven motivational speaker and salesman for a legal services company, PPL, or prepaid legal. He was known for his dazzling smile, his boundless energy, and his deep commitment to his faith as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. To his friends and fellow church members, Travis was a devout, principled man, dedicated to his community and his spiritual journey. He spoke openly about his desire to find a worthy woman within his faith, to marry in the temple, and to build a family. But like many individuals, Travis lived a life of layered complexity. Beneath the surface of the devout Mormon was a man who grappled with the universal desires for companionship and intimacy, desires that sometimes conflicted with the strict tenets of his religion. He was attractive, popular, and engaged in a dating life that was more active and varied than many in his immediate circle knew. He sought connection, a profound and lasting love, but he also navigated the more transient, physical relationships that he kept separate from his spiritual life. It was this dichotomy, this space between the man he presented to the world and the man he was in private, that would ultimately create the conditions for tragedy. In September of 2006, at a PPL conference in Las Vegas, Nevada, Travis Alexander's world collided with that of Jodi Arias. Jodi was 26, an aspiring photographer from Yreka, California. She was strikingly beautiful, with large, expressive eyes and a quiet intensity. To Travis, she was immediately captivating. She was not a member of his church, but she was intelligent, artistic, and seemed drawn to his ambition and charm. Their connection was instant and electric. What began as a professional acquaintance quickly blossomed into a fervent romance. Within weeks, they were inseparable. Theirs was a relationship defined by passion. They embarked on road trips, sent each other a torrent of emails and text messages, and spoke on the phone for hours. Jodi was enamored. She saw in Travis everything she seemed to be looking for, a successful, handsome, and loving partner. To demonstrate her commitment, she began studying the Mormon faith, and in November 2006, just 2 months after they met, she was baptized into the church. For a time, it appeared to be a perfect match. From the outside, they were a vibrant, attractive young couple embarking on a life together. Travis's friends saw how happy he was, how completely smitten he seemed. But the intensity that fueled their connection also contained the seeds of its destruction. The relationship was a whirlwind of emotional highs and staggering lows. Their arguments were as passionate as their reconciliations. Jodi, deeply invested, became increasingly possessive. Travis, who valued his independence and his social life, began to feel suffocated. The differences in their personalities and their long-term goals started to create fractures. Travis was looking for a specific type of partner for a temple marriage, and he began to express doubts that Jody, despite her conversion, was that person. He found her to be emotionally volatile, jealous, and insecure. After just 5 months of this tumultuous romance, in late January 2007, Travis ended the relationship. For most couples, this would be the end of the story. A painful but necessary parting of ways. But for Jodi Arias, the breakup was not an ending. It was, in her mind, merely an obstacle to be overcome. She did not accept the separation. Her love, which had once been a source of shared joy, began to curdle into a dangerous and all-consuming obsession. Travis, for his part, did not enforce a clean break. The physical and emotional bond they had forged was difficult to sever completely. He allowed Jodi to remain in his life, and their relationship transitioned into a complicated arrangement. They were no longer a couple, but they continued to engage in a physical relationship whenever Jodi would visit him in Mesa. Travis confided in friends that he knew it was wrong and that he felt guilty, but he was unable to cut the final tie. He was, in essence, trying to have it both ways: the freedom of a single man and the physical intimacy of his former relationship. This ambiguity would prove to be a fatal miscalculation. It sent a mixed message to a woman who was looking for any sign, any glimmer of hope, that they would one day be together again. In the months following the official breakup, Jodi's behavior grew increasingly erratic and alarming. Her need to be close to Travis manifested in a chilling campaign of stalking that blurred the lines between devotion and delusion. In the summer of 2007, she decided to move from California to Mesa, ostensibly to be closer to the larger Mormon community there, but the true reason was clear to everyone: she wanted to be near Travis. She moved into the home of a local couple, living just minutes away from him. Her presence was a constant. She would show up at his house unannounced, often letting herself in with a key she was supposed to have returned. She would appear at social gatherings he attended, her eyes fixed on him, monitoring his interactions with other women. Travis's friends grew wary of her. They saw a darkness in her that Travis himself seemed, at times, to ignore. They warned him about her, telling him she was unstable, that her behavior was not normal. The obsession escalated. Travis would wake up in the middle of the night to find Jodi in his house, just standing and watching him. He once told a friend he felt like she was watching him sleep. On another occasion, he returned his car to find 2 of his tires slashed. He had no direct proof, but he knew, with a certainty that chilled him, that Jodi was responsible. His email and social media accounts were repeatedly hacked. Private conversations he had with other women were suddenly known to Jodi, who would confront him with the details. The surveillance was relentless. She listened to his voicemails, read his texts, and tracked his every move. In her mind, this was not stalking. It was a testament to her love. She was fighting for him, proving her devotion in the only way she knew how. She believed that if she could just eliminate the other women from the picture, if she could be the only one in his life, he would eventually realize that they were meant to be together. For Travis, however, her actions were becoming a source of profound fear and anxiety. He described her to friends as a stalker, as someone he couldn't get rid of. He changed the locks on his doors, but the psychological intrusion continued unabated. He was trapped in a web of his own making, a web woven from a past relationship he couldn't fully end and a woman who refused to let him go. The dynamic reached a critical point when Travis began to seriously date other women, women who fit the mold of a potential Mormon wife. One of these women was Mimi Hall, a fellow member of the church. His relationship with Mimi was different. It was calmer, more aligned with his stated life goals. In May 2008, Travis and Mimi went on a work-related trip to Cancun, Mexico. This was a significant step, a public acknowledgement of a new relationship. Jody inevitably found out. The knowledge that Travis was with another woman in a romantic setting seems to have been a breaking point. Her jealousy, which had been simmering for over a year, now boiled over into a cold and focused rage. While Travis was in Cancun with Mimi, Jody accessed his email account and sent a vicious, anonymous message to Mimi's boss, filled with lies about her character. It was a desperate, malicious act designed to sabotage Travis's new relationship and punish both him and his new partner. When Travis returned, he was furious. The violation was too great. He confronted Jody, and their already frayed connection seemed to finally snap. He told his friends that he was done, that he was terrified of her and needed to cut her out of his life completely. He believed he had finally made the definitive break. But he underestimated the depths of Jody's obsession and the lengths to which she was now willing to go. In the final days of May 2008, Jody Arias began to make preparations. Her actions were no longer the spontaneous, emotional outbursts of a jilted lover. They were methodical, calculated, and terrifyingly deliberate. On May 28th, she rented a white Ford Focus from a dealership in Redding, California, near her grandparents' home in Wairika, where she was then living. She specifically requested a car that was not red, her favorite color, a small but conscious step toward anonymity. Her stated plan was a road trip to visit a male friend in Salt Lake City, Utah. But her true destination lay hundreds of miles off that path, in Mesa, Arizona. To conceal her journey, she engaged in a series of deceptions. Before leaving, she turned off her cell phone, ensuring it could not be tracked through cell tower pings. She purchased 3 separate gas cans, filling them with fuel. This would allow her to make the long drive to Arizona and back without having to use a credit card at a gas station, a transaction that would create a digital and geographical footprint. It was the plan of someone who was not only going somewhere they shouldn't, but who was already thinking about how to prove they were never there. As she began her drive, she took another strange precaution. She removed the front license plate from the rental car and placed it in the trunk. In Arizona, only a rear plate is required, but in California and Utah, a front plate is mandatory. It was a minor detail, but one that suggested a meticulous mind considering every angle of her clandestine journey. She then rotated the rear license plate, turning it upside down. This act served no practical purpose other than to make the plate more difficult to read at a glance, another layer of obfuscation in a journey shrouded in secrecy. She drove through the night, a solitary figure hurtling through the darkness, fueled by a purpose known only to her. On June 2nd, she sent a text message to Travis. Her tone was casual, friendly. She was simply an old friend checking in. Travis, seemingly unaware of the storm that was gathering, responded in kind. He was busy preparing for another work trip, this one an all-expenses-paid incentive trip to Cancun, the same destination he had visited with Mimi Hall just weeks before. This time, however, he had invited another woman to join him, a different woman he was interested in. He was, by all accounts, moving on with his life. His final communications with friends were filled with excitement and anticipation for this trip. He spoke to his friend and mentor, Sky Hughes, on the phone on the evening of June 3rd. He was upbeat, talking about his plans and his future. He made no mention of Jody Arias or any sense of impending doom. He believed she was hundreds of miles away in California. He believed he was safe in his own home. Sometime in the early hours of June 4th, 2008, Jody Arias arrived silently in Mesa. She parked the white Ford Focus down the street from Travis's home and approached the house on foot. The details of her entry remain debated. She claimed she found a door unlocked. It is more likely she used a key she had kept or entered through the dog door. something a neighbor later reported seeing her do on a previous occasion. Inside the house, the atmosphere, as captured by Travis's own camera, was initially light and intimate. Travis, apparently surprised but not alarmed by her presence, welcomed her in. The two spent the night together, resuming the physical relationship that had been the fraught and complicated core of their post-breakup connection. Later that morning, they took a series of photographs with Travis's new digital camera. The initial images are playful, almost mundane. There are photos of Jody, nude and posing. There are photos of Travis, also nude in the shower. They are images of a shared, private moment, seemingly consensual and relaxed. And then, the sequence of images takes a sudden, horrifying turn. At 5:29 p.m., a picture is taken of Travis in the shower, alive and looking directly at the camera. Just moments later, another photograph is captured. It is an accidental shot, a picture of the ceiling, likely taken as the camera was dropped or fell. When this photo was later enhanced by investigators, a small, dark shape was visible in the corner, the reflection of a figure in Travis's eye from the previous photo, a figure holding a long object. The next image in the sequence is the most chilling. It is a photograph of Travis Alexander, no longer standing. He is on the floor, slumped against the wall of the shower. A torrent of blood is visible on his face and chest. His throat has been cut from ear to ear. He is still alive in this photograph, his eyes open, but his life is draining away in a crimson tide. The final recoverable image shows what appears to be a leg, clad in a sock, dragging Travis's bloody body across the beige tile floor. The digital camera, a silent witness, had documented the final, brutal moments of Travis Alexander's life. The forensic evidence would later fill in the horrific details that the camera could not capture. In that bathroom, a scene of intimacy had transformed into a scene of unspeakable violence. Jody had attacked Travis with a knife. The struggle was violent and desperate. Travis fought for his life, but he was overwhelmed. He was stabbed between 27 and 29 times. The wounds were frenzied, covering his back, chest, and hands, defensive wounds indicating he had tried to ward off the attack. The fatal wound was the deep, gaping slash across his throat, an injury so severe it nearly decapitated him. As if this savagery were not enough, as he lay dying on the floor, Jody retrieved a .25 caliber pistol she had brought with her. She had stolen it from her grandparents' home before her trip. She placed the barrel to his head and fired a single shot into his right temple. The passion had erupted into a frenzy of violence, an act of annihilation. Jody's goal was not merely to harm Travis, it was to erase him. After the murder, a cold, methodical calm seemed to descend upon her. She set about meticulously cleaning the crime scene. She dragged Travis's body from the hallway where she had shot him back into the shower, turning on the water to wash away the blood. She attempted to clean the blood-spattered carpets and floors. Her most crucial act of cleanup involved the camera. She gathered the device, the sole witness to her crime, and put it in the washing machine along with the bloody bedding, hoping to destroy the evidence it contained. She then fled the house, leaving Travis Alexander's body to be discovered in the home he had been so proud of. She got back in the white Ford Focus and drove north, away from the carnage she had left behind. She stopped at a gas station and filled the gas cans, this time using cash to avoid a record. She continued on her journey, driving towards Utah to meet her friend, as if nothing had happened. She called him from the road, her voice cheerful, making plans. A few hours after committing one of the most brutal murders in Arizona's history, Jody Arias was singing along to the radio, taking scenic pictures of the desert landscape and preparing for a date. The psychological disconnect was profound and terrifying. For 5 days, Travis Alexander lay undiscovered. His friends and family grew increasingly concerned when he failed to show up for a conference call and missed his flight to Cancun. They called his phone repeatedly, but the calls went straight to voicemail. On the evening of June 9th, 2008, a group of his concerned friends went to his house to check on him. They found the front door locked. After gaining entry through the master bedroom window, they were met with a scene of disarray. They called out his name, their voices echoing in the silent house. As they walked down the hallway towards the master bathroom, they noticed dark, reddish-brown stains on the light-colored carpet. A sense of dread washed over them. They pushed open the bathroom door and were confronted with a sight that would haunt them forever. Travis Alexander was crumpled in the shower, his body in an advanced state of decomposition in the Arizona heat. The scene was so gruesome that his friends were initially unsure it was him. The horror and grief were immediate and overwhelming. They stumbled out of the house and called 911. The Mesa Police Department arrived to a complex and bloody crime scene. The first and most obvious suspect was the last person known to have had a volatile relationship with the victim, Jodi Arias. When detectives first contacted her, she played the part of a concerned, heartbroken friend. She claimed she had not seen Travis since April and had been in Wairika and on her road trip to Utah at the time of the murder. Her alibi seemed plausible at first, but the evidence at the scene began to tell a different story. The most critical piece of evidence was the digital camera, which police discovered in the washing machine. Though it had been run through a wash cycle, forensic specialists were able to recover the data from the memory card. The deleted photos were a bombshell. They provided a timeline of Travis's last day, placing Jodi Arias at the scene in intimate and then violent circumstances on the very day of the murder. Investigators also found a bloody palm print on the wall of the hallway that contained a mix of DNA from both Travis and an unknown female. When compared with Jodi's DNA, it was a perfect match. The pieces were falling into place, exposing the web of lies she had so carefully constructed. Her rental car record showed that she had driven nearly 3,000 miles in just a few days, far more than a simple round trip to Salt Lake City would require. The math pointed directly to a detour to Mesa. On July 15, 2008, Jodi Arias was indicted by a grand jury for the first-degree murder of Travis Alexander. She was arrested at her grandparents' home in California. Her story began to change. The initial claim that she hadn't been there was now impossible to maintain. So, she invented a new narrative. She admitted to being present, but claimed they were attacked by two masked intruders. She described a terrifying home invasion where the intruders killed Travis and she, fearing for her life, managed to escape. She claimed she didn't report it because she was afraid the intruders would come after her and her family. This story was elaborate, detailed, and utterly unbelievable. It did not align with any of the evidence found at the scene. There was no sign of forced entry, no foreign DNA, nothing to suggest the presence of anyone other than Travis and Jodi. The story of the ninjas, as it came to be known, was quickly dismantled by investigators as a desperate, almost laughable fabrication. Faced with irrefutable evidence and a failing story, Jodi's defense team was forced to pivot once more. By the time her trial began in January 2013, her narrative had evolved into its final and most shocking form, self-defense. She now admitted to killing Travis, but she claimed she did so only after he had attacked her in a fit of rage. She painted a picture of Travis Alexander not as a beloved friend and devout church member, but as a violent, abusive monster who had subjected her to physical and emotional torment for years. The trial became a national media spectacle. Broadcast live, it captivated millions. The prosecution laid out the evidence of a premeditated, cold-blooded murder, highlighting the stalking, the gas cans, the lies, and the sheer brutality of the crime. The defense, in turn, put Travis Alexander's life and character on trial, portraying him as a sexually deviant abuser who had pushed Jodi to her breaking point. Jodi herself took the stand for 18 days, offering a meandering, tearful, and often contradictory testimony. She described a relationship of profound love corrupted by abuse, a narrative that stood in stark contrast to the evidence of her own long-standing obsession and calculated planning. After a 4-month trial, the jury was not convinced by her claims of self-defense. The evidence of premeditation was too overwhelming, the violence too extreme. On May 8, 2013, they found Jodi Arias guilty of first-degree murder. The subsequent sentencing phases were fraught with hung juries, but ultimately, in April 2015, a judge sentenced her to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The tragedy of this case extends far beyond the two people at its center. It left Travis Alexander's family and friends with a wound that will never heal, forced to defend the memory of their loved one against a character assassination played out on a national stage. It stands as a chilling monument to the destructive power of obsession. It is a story about the refusal to accept rejection and how a love that is not returned can transform into a possessive force so powerful that it seeks not to win back the object of its affection, but to destroy it. The line between passion and peril is a fragile one, and in the case of Jodi Arias and Travis Alexander, its crossing resulted in the ultimate, irreversible tragedy. Case 2. The Parking Lot Confrontation. A successful woman's world shatters upon discovering her husband's affair, leading to a fatal public confrontation. In the affluent, planned community of Friendswood, Texas, a suburb of Houston, Clara and David Harris had constructed an existence that was, by every external metric, the embodiment of the American dream. Theirs was a story of shared ambition and remarkable success. Both were dentists, having met at the University of Texas Dental School. After marrying, they pooled their talents and resources, building a thriving dental and orthodontics practice from the ground up. Their professional partnership was as successful as their personal one appeared to be. They lived in a sprawling, multi-million-dollar home, drove luxury cars, and were prominent figures in their community. Clara, born in Colombia, was a former beauty queen, crowned Miss Columbia Houston. She was intelligent, driven, and meticulously organized the business mind behind their joint enterprise. David was the charismatic orthodontist, popular with patients and known for his easygoing charm. They had a blended family. David's teenage daughter from a previous marriage, Lindsay, and their own twin boys. To the outside world, the Harris family was a portrait of prosperity and domestic bliss, a power couple who had achieved everything they had set out to create together. But a facade, no matter how polished or expensive, is still just a facade. By the early 2000s, deep cracks were beginning to form in the foundation of their seemingly perfect life. David, approaching middle age, grew distant and restless. The easy intimacy they had once shared began to evaporate, replaced by a polite but palpable coolness. Clara, perceptive and deeply invested in the life they had built, sensed the shift. A quiet fear began to take root in her heart, a fear that she initially tried to suppress, to explain away as a midlife crisis or the simple erosion of time. Her fear, however, refused to be silenced. It was nurtured by small but significant changes in David's behavior. He started working late more often, became more secretive with his phone, and his affection grew sporadic and forced. The explanation he offered was stress at work, but the excuse felt thin. The intuition that had helped Clara build a business empire now told her that something was fundamentally wrong in her own home. The woman who controlled every aspect of their professional lives felt a terrifying loss of control in her personal life. In the summer of 2002, suspicion hardened into certainty. Unable to live with the anxiety of not knowing, Clara made a decision that would set in motion a tragic chain of events. She did what many people in her position, with her resources, would do. She hired a private investigation firm. She contacted Blue Moon Investigations, a local agency, and tasked them with following her husband. She needed proof. She needed to know if the man she had built her world with was sharing his life with someone else. It was a clinical, almost business-like approach to a problem that was deeply, achingly personal. The investigators did not have to work hard. David was not particularly discreet. The truth, when it came, was a painful cliché. David Harris was having an affair with a woman named Gail Bridges, a receptionist who worked in their very own dental practice. The betrayal was not just an infidelity. It was an invasion. The affair had been happening under her own roof, in the professional space she had so carefully curated. Gail was the woman who answered the phones, who scheduled appointments, who was a part of their daily professional lives. The private investigator's phone call confirming the affair was the moment Clara Harris's world fractured. The life she knew, the one built on trust and shared dreams, was a lie. The initial shock gave way to a wave of cold determination. Clara was a problem solver, a fixer. Her first instinct was not to destroy her marriage, but to save it. She confronted David, who tearfully confessed and promised to end the affair. For a brief period, Clara threw herself into the task of winning her husband back with the same methodical energy she applied to her business. She believed the affair was a symptom of a problem she could solve. She booked spa days and tanning sessions, bought new lingerie, and arranged for romantic dinners. She was determined to be the woman he had fallen in love with, to reignite the passion she felt was slipping away. She was fighting for her family, for the life they had built, for the future she had always envisioned. She gave him an ultimatum. It was either her or Gail. David, perhaps sensing the intensity of Clara's resolve, or perhaps genuinely remorseful, agreed. He fired Gail Bridges and recommitted himself to his wife and family. But promises made in moments of crisis are often fragile. The affair was not so easily extinguished. David continued to see Gail in secret. The private investigators, still on retainer at Clara's insistence, continued their surveillance. The reports they delivered were like small, daily doses of poison, confirming that David's promises were hollow. The breaking point came on July 24, 2002. It began as a day like any other, but a phone call from the private investigator changed everything. David was not at a business meeting as he had claimed. He was with Gail Bridges at the Nassau Bay Hilton, a hotel just a short drive from their home and office, a hotel where the Harrises themselves were members of the health club. The brazenness of the deception was a profound insult. He was not even trying to hide it anymore. A switch flipped inside Clara Harris. The methodical, problem-solving woman was consumed by a raw, primal rage. She would later say she simply wanted to confront them, to see them with her own eyes. She got in her car, but she was not alone. In a decision that would add another layer of tragedy to the night, she brought David's 16-year-old daughter, Lindsay, with her. Lindsay was a pawn in a war she did not understand, a witness to the complete implosion of her family. They drove to the Nassau Bay Hilton, where they met the private investigator in the parking lot. The plan, if one existed at all, was to catch David in the act. They entered the hotel lobby, and it did not take long to find them. David and Gail were standing near the elevators, holding hands. The sight of them together, so casual and intimate in a public space familiar to her, was the final confirmation, the visual evidence that shattered any lingering hope Clara might have held. What happened next was an explosion of pure fury. Clara, A woman known for her composure and elegance strode across the lobby and launched herself at Gail Bridges. She screamed at her, calling her names, her voice echoing through the polished hotel. She ripped Gail's blouse, clawed at her face, and pulled her hair. Hotel staff rushed to intervene, separating the women. David pulled Clara away, trying to calm her, but she was inconsolable. The confrontation was a scene of public humiliation and raw emotion. The carefully constructed image of Clara Harris, successful professional and society wife, was being torn apart in front of strangers. A hotel manager, trying to de-escalate the situation, escorted Clara out of the lobby and into the parking lot. Lindsay followed, weeping. David and Gail remained inside for a few moments before exiting through a different door. The confrontation, it seemed, was over, but it had only moved to a new, more dangerous stage. In the humid night air of the parking lot, the venomous words continued. Clara was now behind the wheel of her silver Mercedes-Benz S-Class sedan, a symbol of the wealth and status she felt was being stolen from her. Lindsay was in the passenger seat, a terrified, captive audience. David walked Gail towards her own car, a Lincoln Navigator. As he walked away from Clara's Mercedes, he reportedly made a final, dismissive gesture, a wave of the hand that Clara interpreted as a final goodbye. From inside the car, Clara watched him walk away with his mistress. She saw the life she had built, the man she loved, choosing another woman. The humiliation of the lobby, the years of quiet suspicion, the recent weeks of false hope, yet all coalesced into a single, unbearable moment. And in that moment, she made a decision. She pressed her foot down on the accelerator. The powerful engine of the Mercedes roared to life. The car lurched forward, aimed directly at David. Lindsay, in the passenger seat, began to scream, "Stop! Stop, Mom! You're going to kill him!" But her pleas were lost in the sound of the engine and her stepmother's rage. The heavy sedan struck David Harris, throwing him to the pavement. But Clara did not stop. She didn't brake. She didn't swerve. The car drove over his body. Then, in a maneuver that would be endlessly debated in the courtroom, she circled her Mercedes around the landscape median of the parking lot. Witnesses, including the private investigator who had begun filming the scene, watched in horror as she accelerated again. She ran over her husband's body a second time, and then a third. The large, luxury vehicle bucked as its tires rolled over him, leaving him broken and lifeless on the asphalt. She finally brought the car to a stop. The rage seemed to vanish as quickly as it had appeared, replaced by a dawning, hysterical horror. She got out of the car, her earlier fury now transformed into shrieks of anguish. She ran to David's body, cradling his head, crying his name. "He's gone," she wailed. "I killed him. I killed him." The private investigator's camera, which had been intended to capture evidence of infidelity, had instead captured the final, brutal moments of a man's life. The footage was grainy and chaotic, but it was undeniable. It showed the silver Mercedes circling, it showed the impacts, and it recorded Lindsay's terrified screams from within the car. When police and paramedics arrived, they found a scene of surreal carnage. A dead man on the pavement, a mangled luxury car, and a woman in a state of complete emotional collapse. Clara was taken into custody, her hands still stained with her husband's blood. She was dazed, alternating between moments of catatonic silence and hysterical grief. She kept repeating, "It was an accident." The case of Clara Harris immediately became a media sensation. It was a story that had everything: wealth, sex, betrayal, and a shockingly violent end. The legal battle that followed was just as dramatic as the crime itself. Clara was charged with first-degree murder. Her defense team argued that David's death was a tragic accident. They claimed that in her emotional state, she had intended only to hit Gail Bridges' empty vehicle to damage the property of her rival. They argued that she was so blinded by tears and rage that she didn't see David, and that the multiple impacts were a result of her panicking, her foot slipping on and off the pedals. They portrayed her as a victim of sudden passion, a legal term for a crime committed in the heat of the moment, which would warrant a lesser charge of manslaughter. The prosecution painted a very different picture. They used the private investigator's video and the testimony of eyewitnesses to argue that Clara's actions were deliberate and malicious. The lead prosecutor, Mia Magnus, argued that circling the car and running over David multiple times was not the action of someone in a panic, it was the action of someone intending to kill. They pointed to the tire marks on the pavement and the forensic evidence on David's body. The most powerful and heartbreaking testimony came from her stepdaughter, Lindsay Harris. On the stand, the teenager tearfully recounted the events of that night, describing her own screams for her stepmother to stop, her pleas going unheeded as the car ran over her father again and again. In February 2003, after a highly publicized trial, the jury delivered its verdict. They rejected the defense's claim of an accident and found Clara Harris guilty of murder. While the jury acknowledged that she had acted under the influence of sudden passion, this finding only affected the sentencing phase. The judge sentenced her to the maximum allowable under that finding, 20 years in prison. Clara Harris served 15 years of her sentence before being released on parole in 2018. The case left an indelible scar on everyone involved. Two young boys grew up with their father dead and their mother in prison. A teenage girl was forced to testify against the woman who had helped raise her, recounting the horrific murder of her own father. The story of Clara Harris is a stark and brutal illustration of how quickly the veneer of civilization can be stripped away by primal emotion. It is a cautionary tale about the destructive power of jealousy and the catastrophic consequences of a single, impulsive act of rage. The life that she and David had spent years building together, a life of wealth and success, was utterly destroyed in a few seconds in a hotel parking lot. All that remains is the tragic memory of a love triangle that ended not just in heartbreak, but in a blaze of violence that consumed everything in its path. Case 3. A deadly obsession for perfection. A brilliant law student executes her boyfriend when he attempts to leave her for another woman. Perfection is a concept that haunts the ambitious. It is a standard, often self-imposed, that demands flawlessness in career, in appearance, and in life. Our third file examines a case born from this relentless pursuit of an idealized existence and the terrifying consequences that unfold when one person's vision of perfection is threatened by another's desire for freedom. The story begins not with a chaotic explosion of passion, but with a cold, calculated precision of a final, irreversible solution. In the quiet, unassuming suburb of Highland Heights, Kentucky, a town nestled just south of Cincinnati, Ryan Poston was meticulously crafting a life of success. At 29, he was a young, handsome attorney with a promising future. He had his own practice, specializing in personal injury law, and was known for his sharp mind, his ambition, and his effortless charm. He lived in a modern condominium, a space that reflected his orderly and aspiring nature. Friends and family described him as driven and charismatic, a man who knew what he wanted and was systematically achieving it. Part of that vision included the perfect partner, someone poised, accomplished, and beautiful, a woman who could stand beside him as he climbed the ladder of social and professional success. In 2011, Ryan Poston met Shayna Hubers on Facebook. On the surface, she seemed to embody many of the qualities he was drawn to. She was 20 years old, exceptionally intelligent, and strikingly attractive, with long dark hair and intense, watchful eyes. She was a gifted student, pursuing a master's degree in psychology at the University of Kentucky, with plans to later attend law school. She was articulate, witty, and shared his intellectual curiosity. Their connection was immediate and potent, a meeting of two sharp minds and ambitious personalities. Their relationship, however, quickly revealed itself to be a volatile and consuming affair. It was characterized by dizzying highs and profound, unsettling lows. The intellectual stimulation and physical passion that drew them together were constantly undermined by a fundamental incompatibility. Ryan, for all his ambition, sought a relationship that was stable and complementary to his life. Shayna, for all her intellect, loved with a possessive and suffocating intensity. She demanded to be the absolute center of his universe, and any deviation from that role was perceived as a betrayal. The relationship fell into a toxic, cyclical pattern of breaking up and reconciling. Ryan would attempt to end things, seeking space and a return to the ordered life he craved. But Shayna would not permit it. Her refusal to let go was not just emotional, it was a campaign. She would bombard him with hundreds of text messages and phone calls in a single day, her messages swinging wildly from declarations of undying love to vicious, cutting insults. She monitored his social media with an obsessive focus, demanding explanations for every woman he interacted with, every like on a photo. She would show up at his condominium unannounced, sometimes waiting for him for hours. She bragged to her friends that she knew his passwords and would read his private messages, a violation she saw not as an intrusion, but as her right. Her friends, and his, saw the relationship for what it was, deeply unhealthy. They warned Ryan, expressing concern over her erratic and controlling behavior. Ryan himself was acutely aware of the problem. He confided in friends and family that he felt trapped, describing Shayna as emotionally manipulative and difficult to be around. He wanted out, but every attempt to extricate himself was met with a new wave of emotional pressure, threats of self-harm, or promises to change that were never kept. He was caught in a cycle of guilt and frustration, unable to make a clean break. Shayna's perspective was entirely different. In her mind, her actions were proof of her superior devotion. She believed Ryan was her intellectual and emotional equal, the only man who could truly appreciate her. Her obsession was, to her, a testament to the depth of her love. She once told a friend, "When I can't be with him, I just want to die." This was the lens through which she viewed the world, a world in which a life without Ryan Poston was not a life worth living. Any woman who entered his orbit was not just a rival, she was a threat to Shayna's very existence. By the autumn of 2012, Ryan had reached a breaking point. He had made a firm, final decision. The relationship with Shayna Hubers had to end permanently. His resolve was strengthened by the appearance of a new woman in his life, a woman who represented everything Shayna was not. Her name was Audrey Bolt. She was a former Miss Ohio USA, a successful, confident, and beautiful woman who moved in the same social circles as Ryan. She was the embodiment of the poised, uncomplicated partner he envisioned for his perfect life. Ryan made plans to see Audrey on the evening of October 12, 2012. They were scheduled to go to a bar and then to a World of Warcraft party, a shared interest. This date was more than just a date. It was a definitive step toward a new future, a future without Shayna. On that day, Ryan communicated his intentions clearly to those closest to him. He told his stepfather that he was ending things with Shayna that night, once and for all. He expressed a sense of finality, but also a palpable sense of apprehension. He knew this breakup would not be like the others. He knew Shayna would not make it easy. Shayna, with her near-omniscient surveillance of his life, was aware of Audrey Bolt. She knew about the planned date. The thought of Ryan with a beauty queen, a woman who had achieved the kind of public recognition Shayna craved, was an intolerable insult to her ego. It was the ultimate rejection. That evening, as Ryan was preparing for his date, anticipating a difficult but necessary conversation, Shayna drove to his condominium. She was not coming to plead or to negotiate. She was coming to ensure that if she could not have him, no one could. The events that transpired inside Ryan Poston's condominium on that October night are known only because of Shayna's own subsequent statements and the cold, unblinking story told by the forensic evidence. She arrived at the condo. The final confrontation began. Ryan, true to his word, told her it was over. He was firm, resolute. He was moving on. For Shayna, this was not a breakup. It was an existential threat. Her carefully constructed world, with Ryan at its center, was about to be annihilated. In her mind, his rejection was an act of profound violence against her, and she chose to respond in kind. As they stood in his dining area, near the table where they had shared meals, the argument escalated. According to Shayna's later claims, Ryan became physically aggressive. But the evidence suggests a different narrative. The evidence suggests an execution. Shayna retrieved Ryan's own handgun, a .380 caliber Ruger he kept for protection. She shot him once in the face. The bullet struck him near the cheekbone. He staggered and fell to the floor. As he lay there, likely dying, she stood over him. The intellectual, the aspiring law student, the woman who prided herself on her logic and reason, fired 5 more times into his prone body. She shot him in the chest, the back, and the head. The violence was not a frenzied panic. It was methodical. It was an eradication. After the 6th and final shot, silence fell in the condominium. Ryan Poston, the ambitious young attorney with a perfect life mapped out, was dead on his dining room floor. Shayna's actions in the immediate aftermath were not those of a terrified victim. They were the actions of someone controlling a narrative. She straightened the table and chairs, a bizarre act of tidying up a scene of brutal violence. Then, approximately 10 minutes after firing the last shot, she picked up her phone and dialed 911. Her voice on the call was eerily calm, almost detached. "Ma'am, I killed my boyfriend in self-defense," she stated, her words clear and steady. She gave the dispatcher her name and the address. She had fired the first shot in her new defense. When police officers arrived, they found Shayna Hubers waiting for them. She was cooperative and composed. Inside, they found the gruesome scene. Ryan Poston lying in a pool of blood, his body riddled with bullets. Shayna was taken to the Highland Heights police station for questioning. It was in the sterile, camera-monitored environment of the interrogation room that the true, chilling nature of her personality was fully revealed. For the next several hours, believing she was not being recorded during the times detectives left the room, Shayna put on a bizarre and horrifying performance. The mask of the grieving, terrified victim slipped away, replaced by an astonishing display of narcissism and a profound lack of empathy. She paced the small room, twirling and pirouetting. She commented on her own appearance. At one point, she snapped her fingers and danced, singing a joyful, full-throated rendition of Amazing Grace. Her monologue was a stream of consciousness of self-obsession and callous disregard for the man she had just killed. "I did it. Yes, I did it. I can't believe I did that," she said, almost conversationally. Then, she wondered aloud about her future. "I don't know if anyone will ever want to marry me if they know that I killed a boyfriend in self-defense. I don't know." She spoke about the shooting with a chilling nonchalance. She told detectives that after the first shot, he was twitching and making noises, so she kept shooting until he was quiet. And then came the most infamous and revealing statement of all. Referring to the first shot that struck Ryan's face, she said, "I gave him the nose job he always wanted." She laughed. This was not the behavior of a woman traumatized by a life-or-death struggle. This was the behavior of someone who had solved a problem, someone whose primary concern, in the wake of taking a human life, was herself. She was worried about her looks, her reputation, and her future marriage prospects. She seemed utterly disconnected from the gravity of her actions. The interrogation video became the single most powerful piece of evidence against her, a window into a mind that saw murder as a justifiable, almost logical, conclusion to a relationship she could no longer control. The trial of Shayna Hubers began in April 2015. Her defense team argued, as she had from the first 911 call, that she was a victim of domestic abuse. They portrayed Ryan Poston as a controlling and emotionally abusive partner who was obsessed with her looks and had pushed her to the brink. They claimed that on the night of the murder, he attacked her and she shot him in a desperate act of self-preservation. The prosecution, led by Michelle Snodgrass, dismantled this narrative piece by piece. They used Shayna's own words against her, the thousands of obsessive text messages, the testimony of friends who described her as the aggressor, and, most damningly, the hours of video from the police interrogation room. They argued that this was not self-defense. This was a premeditated execution. Ryan was shot 6 times, including in the back, while he was on the floor. He was killed because he was leaving her for another woman, a more beautiful and successful woman. It was, the prosecution contended, the ultimate act of narcissistic rage. The jury agreed. After just 5 hours of deliberation, they found Shayna Hubers guilty of murder. During the sentencing phase, the jury recommended a 40-year prison sentence. As the verdict was read, Shayna showed little emotion, maintaining the same cool composure she had displayed since the night of the crime. However, the legal saga was not over. In 2016, her conviction was overturned on a technicality. One of the jurors had been a convicted felon, a fact that was not disclosed during jury selection, which is against Kentucky law. A new trial was ordered. The retrial in 2018 largely mirrored the first. The prosecution once again presented the overwhelming evidence of her obsession and the chilling interrogation video. The defense once again argued that she was a battered woman. But this time, Shayna's own behavior in court seemed to further undermine her case. She was seen smiling and laughing with her defense team at times, appearing detached from the grim proceedings. The second jury reached the same conclusion as the first, guilty of murder. She was once again sentenced to 40 years in prison. The case of Shayna Hubers is a profound and disturbing study in narcissism and the toxic confusion of love with ownership. It is a story about a woman whose high intelligence was not matched by emotional maturity, a woman who could not tolerate rejection. The tragedy is not only the violent, premature end of Ryan Poston's life, but also the chilling realization that for some, other people are not individuals with their own desires and freedoms, but objects to be possessed. Shayna Hubers did not kill for love. She killed to prevent the loss of control, executing her boyfriend with a cold precision that ensured her vision of their life together, if it could not be realized, would never be enjoyed by anyone else. Case 4. The Dentist's Double Life. A successful dentist's seemingly perfect life unravels, revealing a history of deadly secrets when his wife is found dead. For our final file, we journey to the manicured, affluent suburbs of Gwinnett County, Georgia, a place where success is not just an aspiration but an expectation. It is a world of sprawling brick homes, lush green lawns, and communities built around the pillars of family, faith, and professional achievement. It is here that we examine a life so meticulously constructed, so polished on its surface, that its eventual, catastrophic collapse would send shockwaves through the community. This is a story about the ultimate facade, about a man who pursued a vision of perfection with such sociopathic resolve that he would rather commit murder than allow a single crack to show in the perfect image he had built. Dr. Barton Thomas Corbin was a pillar of his community in Beaufort, Georgia. A handsome and successful dentist, he projected an image of effortless confidence and charm. He and his wife, Jennifer, had built a life that seemed to be the envy of their peers. They had met in the early 1990s and married in 1996, a union that appeared to be a perfect match. Barton was the ambitious professional, and Jennifer, a beautiful and vivacious former teacher, was the dedicated mother to their two young sons, Dalton and Dylan. They lived in a large, elegant home in a prestigious neighborhood. They were active in their local church and their children's school. Barton's dental practice was thriving, affording them a life of comfort and luxury. To anyone looking in, the Corbin family was the very picture of suburban bliss, a testament to the rewards of hard work and traditional values. They were a golden family, seemingly untouched by the struggles and complexities that plague so many others. But a home is not defined by its brick and mortar. It is defined by the emotional life within its walls. And inside the Corbin house, the idyllic picture began to fray at the edges, slowly at first, then with terrifying speed. The man who was so charming and affable to his patients and neighbors was a different person behind closed doors. Barton Corbin was a man obsessed with control. His love was conditional, his affection a tool for manipulation. He was prone to fits of rage over minor infractions in messy room, a comment he perceived as disrespectful. Jennifer, once a bright and independent woman, found herself walking on eggshells, constantly trying to manage her husband's moods and appease his rigid expectations. The emotional abuse was insidious and constant. He belittled her intelligence, criticized her appearance, and isolated her from friends and family. He monitored her spending and questioned her movements. The marriage became a prison, gilded and comfortable, but a prison nonetheless. Jennifer's vibrant spirit began to dim, replaced by a quiet anxiety and a growing sense of despair. She confided in her sister and a few close friends that she was deeply unhappy, that the man she had married was a stranger to her, a cold and domineering figure who was slowly erasing her sense of self. The source of Barton's emotional distance and cruelty became terrifyingly clear in 2004. Jennifer, growing increasingly suspicious of his late nights and secretive phone calls, began to investigate. Her search led her to the family computer, where she uncovered a secret email account. What she found there shattered the last remnants of her marriage. Barton was engaged in a long-standing, intensely passionate affair with another woman named Dara, who also worked in the dental field. The emails were not just evidence of infidelity. They were a chronicle of a secret life, a life of romantic getaways, explicit fantasies, and declarations of undying love. They were filled with venomous comments about Jennifer, portraying her as an obstacle, a burden he had to endure. In one particularly cruel exchange, Barton and his mistress fantasized about a future together, a future that could only be realized if Jennifer were no longer in the picture. The betrayal was absolute. It was not a momentary lapse in judgment. It was a calculated, parallel existence built on a foundation of lies. For Jennifer, the discovery was both devastating and liberating. The illusion was shattered, but in its place was a cold, hard clarity. There was nothing left to save. The man she was married to did not love her. He despised her. She made the bravest decision of her life. She was going to file for divorce. She sought legal counsel and began the process of extricating herself and her sons from the toxic environment of her marriage. She spoke to friends about her plans for the future, a future where she could be herself again, free from the weight of Barton's control. There was a sense of hope in her voice, the sound of a woman beginning to reclaim her life. But Jennifer underestimated the depths of her husband's narcissism. Barton Corbin's identity was inextricably linked to the perfect life he had constructed. The successful dentist, the family man, the pillar of the community. This was the character he played, and he would not allow anyone to rewrite the script. A divorce was not just a personal failure, it was a public humiliation. It meant losing control. It meant a messy, public battle over assets, his practice, and most importantly, custody of his children. In his mind, Jennifer's bid for freedom was an act of aggression, a threat to his entire world. And he was not a man who tolerated threats. On the evening of December 4th, 2004, the carefully constructed world of the Corbin family imploded. The next morning, their 7-year-old son, Dalton, woke up and went to his parents' bedroom to wake his mother. He found her lying in bed, unresponsive. He tried to shake her, but she didn't move. Confused and scared, he went to get his father. Barton Corbin called 911. His voice on the call was a performance of panicked grief. He told the dispatcher that he believed his wife had killed herself, that she had been depressed about their marital problems. When police and paramedics arrived, they were met with a scene that, on its surface, seemed to support this narrative. Jennifer Corbin, 33 years old, was dead in her bed from a single gunshot wound to the head. A .38 caliber revolver lay beside her, partially covered by the comforter. A typed suicide note was found in the room, speaking of despair and a life that had become unbearable. The initial assessment pointed towards suicide. It was a tragic but, in the context of a failing marriage, a plausible scenario. Barton played the part of the grieving widower to perfection. He spoke to investigators about Jennifer's depression, her struggles, her unhappiness. He was constructing a narrative, controlling the story just as he had controlled every other aspect of his life. But almost immediately, investigators began to notice details that didn't fit. The position of the gun seemed unnatural. The trajectory of the bullet was odd for a self-inflicted wound. Forensics found no blood spatter on Jennifer's hands, which would be expected if she had fired the gun. The suicide note was impersonal and stilted, lacking the emotional depth one would expect from a mother leaving behind 2 young children. Most importantly, those closest to Jennifer told a completely different story. They told police that she was not suicidal, she was hopeful. She was afraid of her husband, yes, but she was actively planning her escape. She was looking forward to her new life. The suspicion on Barton Corbin began to solidify. Investigators learned of the affair and the impending divorce. The motive was becoming clear. If Jennifer died, there would be no divorce. Barton would keep the house, his practice, his money, and, most cruelly, he would be seen as a tragic victim, a widower left to raise his 2 sons alone. He had even filed a claim on her life insurance policy within days of her death. Murder, disguised as suicide, was the perfect, cold-blooded solution to all of his problems. As detectives from the Gwinnett County Police Department dug deeper into Barton Corbin's past, they prepared to interview his family and friends, looking for any information that might shed light on his character. It was during this phase of the investigation that they received a phone call that would transform the case from a single, tragic death into something far more sinister. The call was from a woman in Augusta, Georgia. She told the police that what had happened to Jennifer Corbin sounded terrifyingly familiar. She told them that 14 years earlier, Barton Corbin's dental school girlfriend had also died of a single gunshot wound to the head. Her death had also been ruled a suicide. Her name was Dorothy Dolly Hearn. The revelation was a bombshell. The odds of a man's wife and former girlfriend both committing suicide in the exact same manner were astronomically, impossibly low. The investigators knew, with a certainty that sent a chill down their spines, that they were not dealing with a man plagued by tragic coincidence. They were dealing with a serial predator. The investigation immediately expanded, pulling open a cold case file from 1-9-9-0. Dolly Hearn was, by all accounts, a brilliant and vibrant young woman. She was at the top of her class at the Medical College of Georgia's dental school, where she met and began dating a fellow student, Barton Corbin. Their relationship, like his later marriage to Jennifer, was intense and volatile. Barton was possessive and controlling. Dolly, an independent and spirited woman, chafed under his authority. She, too, had spoken to friends about her desire to end the relationship. On June 6, 1990, just as she was about to graduate, Dolly Hearn was found dead in her Augusta apartment. She was lying on her sofa with a single gunshot wound to her left temple. A gun lay on the floor nearby. The man who discovered her body and called the police was her boyfriend, Barton Corbin. At the time, with limited evidence to suggest otherwise, her death was ruled a suicide. Her family never believed it. They knew Dolly was excited about her future, about starting her career. But their pleas for a more thorough investigation went unheeded. The case was closed. Now, 14 years later, Dolly Hearn's death was viewed through a new, horrific lens. The parallels to Jennifer's death were undeniable. Both women were romantically involved with Barton Corbin. Both were seeking to end the relationship. Both were found dead from a single gunshot wound. Both deaths were staged to look like suicides. And in both cases, Barton Corbin was the one who found the body and controlled the initial narrative. Investigators re-examined Dolly's case with a fresh perspective. They found that Barton was the last person to see her alive. He had been with her at her apartment the night she died. They had argued. The gun used was his. The suicide theory, which had seemed plausible in isolation, now appeared to be a transparent and cynical fabrication. He had gotten away with murder once before. He had perfected his method. He believed he could do it again. Armed with this devastating pattern of behavior, the case against Barton Corbin for the murder of his wife became overwhelming. Investigators found suspicious searches on his computer from the weeks leading up to Jennifer's death. He had researched poisons, toxins, and ways to kill someone without leaving a trace before ultimately settling on the method he had used successfully once before. The evidence from the affair, the financial motive of the divorce, and the testimony of Jennifer's friends who spoke of her fear, all painted a picture of a cold, calculating killer. In December 2004, less than a month after his wife's death, Dr. Barton Corbin, the respected dentist and grieving widower, was arrested and charged with the murder of Jennifer Corbin. A short time later, authorities in Augusta reclassified Dolly Hearn's death as a homicide and issued a warrant for his arrest in that case as well. The facade had crumbled completely, revealing the monster that had been hiding in plain sight for over a decade. Faced with two separate murder trials and the possibility of the death penalty in Georgia, Barton Corbin made a final, calculated move to save himself. In September 2006, he accepted a plea deal. He pleaded guilty to the malice murders of both Jennifer Corbin and Dolly Hearn. In a courtroom filled with the grieving families of the two women whose lives he had stolen, he was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms in prison. He showed no remorse, offering no explanation, no apology. His final act was one of cold, pragmatic self-preservation. The case of Barton Corbin is a chilling exploration of the dark side of perfectionism. His crime was not a momentary lapse, not an explosion of passion in the heat of the moment. It was the result of a long-standing, pathological need to maintain control over his image and his life. He did not love Jennifer or Dolly. He saw them as accessories, as components of the perfect life he was entitled to. When they threatened to disrupt that life by exercising their own free will, they ceased to be people in his eyes. They became problems to be eliminated. His story serves as a terrifying reminder that the most dangerous monsters are often the ones who are the most convincing masks, living secret, deadly lives behind a perfect smile. And with that, we close this file. The stories we have explored tonight are stark reminders of the fragility of the human heart and the devastating consequences when love turns to obsession, jealousy, and rage. They are stories of lives cut short, of futures erased, and of families left to navigate an ocean of grief. The darkness that resides within these narratives is profound, yet in examining them, we honor the memory of the victims and perhaps we learn something vital about the importance of empathy, the dangers of possession, and the lines that must never be crossed. Thank you for joining us here at the Crime Folio. We hope these stories, as somber as they are, provide a space for quiet reflection. May your night be peaceful and your dreams untroubled. Good night.